Well then, hello friends. Unannounced appearance this evening, although it is our S.O.S live stream. Stephen on Sunday. As you can see from the surroundings, I'm in a slightly different location again. I hope there's sufficient light. I decided today, guys, and welcome obviously those of you joining us live, and to those of you who are coming a little bit later, joining the delivery a little bit later. Thank you and welcome. What I've decided to do, guys, now we've been discussing topical issues most of the time. We discuss topical issues of the past week or the past couple of weeks. And I try to do so in context of this notion that I'm calling the original principle. And no, it's not a tongue-in-cheek quote after it, the meaning of life, ? The original principle and the meaning of life. This will eventually be the title, I'm hoping, of a book, which will incorporate all of this understanding in such a manner that it can be, fielded out to anybody who has ears to hear and eyes to see, as they say, in Scripture. Now, if you want to make comments, guys, go ahead. Or if you want to raise questions while we're dealing with this topic today, and I'll do my best to get to them as we go through it. Now, I've deliberately only used a handful of slides tonight because some of these topics will require a little bit of explanation. However, the idea behind this is that, look, there's a lot of social commentators out there dealing with the symptoms of the problem. And by that, I can say things like corporate overreach, dysfunctioning and corrupt governments, the immigration crisis, the pandemic, and the other, planned things like the recent hantavirus emergency declaration. Now we find out that there are boxes of ticks being dropped all over American farms, apparently, for the purposes perhaps of infecting people so that they are allergic to red meat and so on and so forth, all part of the big sort of diabolical plan, What was the latest thing? Mosquitoes that have been pre-engineered. Arguably, they're saying it's for the safety of the population to cut out malaria, but in fact, it looks like it could be quite the opposite. It could be, again, engineering insects, releasing them in their millions. I think the number given was 64 million of them being released. I think it's in California, guys. If they are previously engineered, they could have a devastating effect on the population. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make, guys, because this is why I believe this original principle is so important, that the more of us that understand this original principle idea, the sooner we're going to have a consensus, not only about what the problem actually is, and of course it has multiple facets, but the actual real underlying fundamental problem, which in fact is human evil. All right. Now, I'll say one thing right at the start, guys. It's not supposed to be here. It's not supposed to be part of the equation. It's not a yin-yang type balance, good and evil. No. It's a misunderstanding, okay? Evil is an attack on the original right, left, good, bad, hot, cold, or better and worse, male, female, all that balance. Evil is an attack on that, and it can only come through people, okay? So once we start to really understand that, the solution becomes much clearer. So what I'm going to try and do today, guys, and perhaps in subsequent weeks, maybe we'll discuss a little about ongoing events, but only in direct context of this original principle, okay? And thereafter, the idea is that we will slowly move our way through progressive slides, which will hopefully be something that people can come back to and look at later on or refer on to their friends. And they'll be in a sort of a sequence so that they'll make some sort of rational, logical sense, okay? So without further ado, and again, like I say, the point I'm making here is that there are many, many social commentators out there, many of them far better at this than I am, discussing the on-the-ground symptoms of this overarching problem of human evil and how it's manifested itself in human society, okay? But there's actually a theme behind this. It's all literally about the fact that there is such a thing as the original principle. It's how we're supposed to be living. And there are, if you like, dark forces which manifest themselves in what we can only call wicked or evil people. And those dark forces have an agenda. Now, they may not all be 100% united in that agenda, but it's just a bit like, what analogy could I use? If you have a whole bunch of hungry people and they're told that there's free bread being given away at the factory, okay, they might all find different ways of getting to there, but the overarching ambition is to get to the bread factory so they can get their free bread, okay? So in the same way, people are united, generally speaking, along two general themes, if you like. One is the theme of good, although it's hardly understood, and the other is the theme of evil, which is much better understood by those who practice it. And so that ideology unites them in their agenda. And the agenda here is to deny us both remembrance and a return to the original principle. And in its place, they are setting up what I call diabolical constructs for the express purposes of denying humanity its rightful place within this original principle. All right. Now, having said all that, let's get to the facts now, because I'm not going to ask anyone to believe anything. All right. I was talking to some people recently, some religious people, actually quite high up in an establishment. And I was talking a little bit about this. And this man said to me, oh, it sounds to me like you're on the hunt for converts and you're wanting to build, your own church or something. I said, absolutely not. I said, converts in the sense, yes, people that might listen and might take something away of value and apply it to their own lives. Absolutely. But I said, and this actually happened, guys. This is a true little anecdote. I was let's call it, I was a pastor, an assistant pastor in a family church in Anchorage for a while. I was also a Catholic youth minister prior to that. And I was in the business of personally searching, trying to find out. Hi, Vanessa. Great to see you too. Thank you. And I was in the process of trying to discover, what's life all about? And, many of us go through this, don't we? We're trying to, because there's nothing clear. We've got vague notions, we've got philosophies, and we've got histories, and we've got theologies, and we've got religious movements, and with science, of course. And when you add it all up together, it's hard to come to a full rounded understanding of what the proverbial meaning of life is. What am I supposed to be doing with my life in order to live it to the fullest as a member of the human race, as well as me as an individual? What am I supposed to be doing? What is, in that sense, right and what is wrong? And the truth is, it's not clear, guys. And I've studied world religions, I've studied psychology, I've studied philosophy. And the more I studied them, the more I realized that none of these disciplines actually can call themselves the truth. They can claim to be pointing at the truth or leading people towards that truth. But by very nature of the fact that most of these disciplines and institutions have formed themselves into diabolical constructs, and if you've heard me speaking before, guys, you hear me always talking about constructs, autocratic constructs that deny you and me the right to relate directly to the source, to the divine, and from there make decisions based on what we truly believe or hopefully feel from connection with that divine, whatever. Now, I don't mind what you call him, it, they, them, her. I don't mind. But just the acknowledgement that there is another source somewhere. And I think I'm about to prove this to you, or at least to begin to start to prove this to you without even asking you to believe anything. I'm going to show you facts. I'm going to show you scientific realities. And I'm going then to ask you yourself the internal question, what could all this possibly mean? Now, I've come to some conclusions myself, but as I said before, this is not about believing stuff just because Stephen said it and he's sort of a good guy and he's honest and he's proven his worth. That helps, of course, but that's not good enough. Truth must be its own witness. That's a phrase I use quite a lot, guys. Words, like I'm speaking now, are only metaphors, but truth is its own witness. In other words, we're not going to argue, I hope, that, believe me, it's only orange juice. There's no vodka in there, guys, okay? So If I say that is lamb's blood, you could argue and say, well, I don't believe you, Stephen. I'm saying, no, it is. It's a bit strange, mind you. It's orange coloured. I know that, but trust me, it's lamb's blood. And well, that's a bit of a stretch, Stephen. I've never heard of, orange lamb's blood. And the only answer to it is I give you the glass and you take a sip and you go, actually, Stephen, no, I'm convinced that's orange juice. And I go, well, give it back here. And I go, absolutely, you're right. The guy who told me it was lamb's blood was obviously misleading me. So we don't argue about things that are self-evidently true. All right. And arguably, what most of the battles and wars and serious arguments down through history have been on the individual level or the collective or national level or global level, right? It's always about what people believe. People aren't arguing about factual, self-evident truths. We tend to agree on that. This is a pair of glasses. Why? Well, we all know that. That's what they're there. They're there to improve your eyesight. We call them glasses. Yeah, it's not a decoration to be put in your top pocket, although it could serve as such. You could have decorative glasses with nice shiny bits on them to put in your top pocket, but then they would become decorative glasses. They're still glasses. No one's arguing that that's a mouse or a horse or a cat, right? It's a pair of glasses. So the point I'm trying to make again, as we get started here now in a moment, is I'm only going to show you facts. Some of those facts do relate to documented, let's call them authorities, such as mythologies and scripture and stuff. But it's the facts that connect them and the facts interwoven that unite them, which will refer to these other scientific facts. Hello, Nobby, nice to see you. And hello, Guerrero. I hope listen, one of these days you're going to have to tell me how to pronounce that. Guerrero. Anyway, thank you for saying hello. Nice person. I can pronounce the second name, but I don't embarrass you too much in case people know who you are. Mr. Gilchrist as well, greetings. Good, nice to see you. Thank you for saying hello. And as we go through this, guys, if there's a pertinent question, I'll keep looking over to the side. I know you don't see them here, guys, but I can pop them up on the screen. If a pertinent question comes up, I'll do my best to answer it as we go along. Now, I've only got 5 or so information slides tonight because I want to do this slowly and methodically and in a way that hopefully makes absolute sense to everyone. So without further ado, as they say, let's pop to the first slide and see what, and again, a small apology for the black line there, don't worry about it. The point is, it's the text. So this now, if you want to, some of these slides are up on Instagram under, I think it's under my name, Stephen T. Manning. But anyway, this is one of them. Symbolically, this is what it's all about, right? Because clearly that's a symbol, yeah? And you'll notice it's slightly different. The one there on the screen in the center is slightly different to the updated version top right, where I've made a point, even though you could argue the one at the bottom is similar in that the blue yin-yang symbol, the blue part of it is somewhat dominant, although that's not really the right word, but it's to create, there is an order to this, guys, as you'll see in a moment. And the order is white for source or deity or God, blue for feminine or for the mind, and then red for masculine or the body. That's just we're just touching on it here now, guys, and I'll show you why. All right. So the original principle, universal, absolute, and eternal, the foundation of all that is good. Now, just, if we ask ourselves there just for a minute, guys, well, that's quite a claim, Stephen. As I say on the first slide there, I'll just pop it back there to the opening slide, introducing the first ever documented substantial archetype. So I'll just explain this very briefly, and please bear with me, guys, if you're already experts in psychology or have heard me talking about this before. But very simply, archetypes are notions in the field of psychology, right? Well, they're more than notions, really, because they've been proven, if you like, to exist, although you can't pick one up like a glass of orange juice, all right? Or a pair of glasses. You can't they talk about it in psychological circles. These are influences that have a bearing on each of us, whether we sort of like it or not. And the easiest example to give, the simplest one, is if a child, and particularly a young woman, if a young woman is raised without a father figure, for example, she doesn't have a father archetype in her life, she will go looking for that archetype. Right? She might find it in a school teacher, but or when she gets of age, she might start dating older men somewhat inappropriately. And this is often linked, psychologically linked, to the absence of the father archetype. So you might say, well, hold on a minute. A father is a substantial thing. It's a man. It's a daddy. Yes, I know. But that's individual fathers. All right. And I'm only using one, right? There's many of them. There's the hero. There's the trickster. There's the mother, of course. There's the crone, the witch. A guy called Carl Gustav Jung did extensive studies on this. And basically, as we go through our lives, if you lived your life inside a cube or something, or an igloo, and were never exposed to society, your whole persona would be completely underdeveloped, because you need to interact with these archetypes during your life. Okay. But archetypes, as I say in one of the books I wrote, are shadows, not things. They're themes. They're not constructs, or at least that's what we thought. And what I'm going to show you here today, the beginnings of this, guys, I've no idea how many of these we'll have to do before we get sort of come full circle and bring it back into reality to today's life, how it affects you and me and everyone around us, and political world and the financial world and the religious world and the academic world, and us in our personal struggles as to what to do, what is the meaning of life, what am I supposed to be doing. All right. But it does actually come full circle, and it's extraordinarily convincing. There's a few small pockets where questions still remain that have yet to be fully resolved, but they're only pockets, if you like, in a larger fabric that is so intertwined and so convincing that you sort of know, well, look, if we poke at these few remaining holes long enough and, ask the right questions, the answers will come. But for now, okay, I'm going to introduce you to the first ever documented substantial archetype. This is an archetype, so it's something that affects us all through time and space and history. Subliminally, we're not necessarily aware that this is happening, but we are reacting to it and with it and because of it, okay? And believe it or not, because it's a substantial archetype, it has properties to it that I can show you the proofs that this thing exists, rather than just talking about notions and themes and ideas and constructs and the deep subconscious and all that. No. This thing is real. It's as real. It's, as a matter of fact, it's more real, even though it's an archetype, it's more real than most of reality. Now, there's something. That's a new one. I didn't think of saying that before, but I believe that's a fair statement. This is more real than most of what we call reality. So we've just seen that. So we go to slide one and you say, okay, what's Manning on about here? All right, let's start with this simple diagram here, okay? Now, as you can see the title, symbolically, this is what it's all about, number 2. These are the ones that are up on Instagram, just to get people going, all right? So I'm just going to read the text here, guys. I might have to enlarge it a little bit for myself. Yes. So as you see, the original principle symbol has this yin-yang structure to it, but it's not the traditional yin-yang. First of all, because the traditional yin-yang tends to be black and white, okay? And there's 2 possibilities for that. One is the misunderstanding down through the ages that it represents hot and cold, dark and light, sun and moon, and then, believe it or not, masculine and feminine. So the feminine is parked in with the evil traits, negativity, femininity. So there's a few constructs that are in there that don't belong there, okay? Evil does not belong in the yin-yang equation. It just doesn't belong there. It's an attack on it, okay? So the original yin-yang, I'm saying, was supposed to be deep red and deep blue, okay? That would have been the original colors for it, and I'm going to show you why as we go along here today, right? And it'll all start to make sense, guys. So first of all, the yin-yang elements of the original principle are embedded in the unifying source. Now, bear with me, guys, because like I said to you, this is all literal, factual, scientific, okay? So I'm using somewhat colorful or symbolic language here to explain something, but we'll move into the facts in a moment. So I've made this statement: the yin-yang elements, which is the red and the blue, as you see, right? And that's my drawing, by the way. I've used this. It's the best thing I can use. I might be able to get AI to construct something a bit more triadic or something, but this is the best way for now to explain it, okay? So the male and the female are embedded in the unifying source. Now, what's the unifying source? Well, some people would call it God. Some people call it source. Some call it the universe, the energy, the overarching energy, the energy of creation. It doesn't really matter at this point, and we certainly don't want to get distracted by theological notions, or religious concepts and constructs at the moment. Not at the moment, okay? So I'm telling you that the original masculine and the original feminine were embedded in this original encompassing source. And there's a symbolic drawing of it, this sphere inside a slightly larger sphere. And this is actually quite important, guys. You'll see why, okay? So each of the three parts has thematic, mathematic, and color properties that correspond accordingly to all known aspects of life, energy, and matter, including human history. What a statement to make, guys. What a statement. So I'm saying, yes, there's thematic properties to this. There are mathematical properties to this. Let's call it a triad for now, the three elements, okay? And there are color properties to it as well, which you can see, red, blue, and white, okay? Which correspond to all known aspects of life, energy, and matter, including human history. Now, first thing I'd say, if someone was making this claim to me off the top of their heads, right? And I haven't watched the time here. I hope I better make sure. Oh yeah, good. We're doing fine. Now, if someone made a claim like that to me straight away, I'd say, it corresponds to all known aspects of life and matter on the planet, All right, energy and matter. Oh, that's great. What about plant life? That's green. Where's the bloody green here? Yeah. Very simple, straightforward answer to that, guys, which actually makes complete sense. It's one of the questions I had asked myself at one time. Well, interestingly, green, this is going to do your heads in. Green as we see it is not actually green. What's happening is the leaves actually reflect light. It's what we see as the reflected light. So the light's coming from the sun, right? And the light from the sun is split into all these diffuse colors. If you look at a rainbow, all right? The light from the sun comes down and it hits the foliage. And it is the green wavelengths that are bounced off the foliage. And we see the wavelength that's bounced off. Why is that wavelength bounced off? The answer to that, believe it or not, is because the red wavelengths and the blue wavelengths at the either end of the spectrum are being absorbed. That's how, like, for instance, to answer that question, just off the top of my head. So the deep reds and the deep blues, the two opposite ends of the spectrum, are being absorbed into plants, okay? But we think they're green, when in fact, literally speaking, yeah, I would still say plants are green. Of course they are. Grass is green. But actually, it's the wavelengths that bounce off them that give them their color. Now, isn't that interesting? Yeah? So there's the original triad, okay? Let's see what we've got now. Next slide. So now we have the color spectrum here, guys. And I'll bring this up a little bit for you. So before we go into the numbers, we'll get to that in a second, okay? We'll just read the text here. The colors and the numbers correspond with the properties of light itself, the source of all life energy and the one unifying constant in the universe. So before we go into the explanation there of the numbers, just bear with me for a second, guys. It's literally a fact. If you say to anybody, okay, what are you made of? And you say, well, blood, flesh, bones, brains, sinews, water, largely water, funny enough. And you go, yeah, but ultimately break that down, keep breaking it down, break it down, break it down, break it down, go right back to the original burst of creation. And we have this as the Big Bang in science, or the deity saying, God says, let there be light. They all agree, if you like, that somehow, where it came from, I'm not trying to guess now, but somehow there was a massive burst of light energy that we see it as light. Boom, the original star, the massive explosion. And it's from that energy source that all life on this planet, and as far as we know, all life in the universe, originated from. All right. So when you trace things right the way back, you can say, well, yeah, believe it or not, even sound is originally made from light. That's a bit of a hard one to explain. I studied this at one time. I haven't got that right to hand to make that clear, but everything, even the table here, the computer, the electricity, everything originated in light. So this is the unifying construct, okay? So I'm suggesting here that this is the one unifying constant in the whole universe. So if there's one thing, you could say, right, you go to Ireland, you say, well, name me one thing that unites all Irish people. And somewhat ironically, it would be the English language, let's say, all right? Because there are pockets where people don't speak Gaelic, So you could say something like that. It could be, they all went to national schools or something like that, But of course, the broader and broader you ask this question, okay, give us one thing that unites or unifies all people in the world. Well, you can't say, well, they all believe in this, they all believe in that. You could say stuff like, well, they're all made of flesh and blood, they all have a brain, they all have to find some means of earning a living, although that's another question for another day, and so on and so forth. But if you take it back far enough, the one thing, you say, okay, what unites plants and animals and humans and buildings and academics and politics, and actually the one thing it all traces back to, especially the physical world, is light. Okay, it's light. All right, so that's why this is super important and why this has such a bearing. And as I hope I'll be able to explain to you as we go through this, whether or not we get to it today or not, you'll start realizing mysteries that have never been fully explored or explained, or have been explained with beliefs that are like, not so sure about that. You're telling me I should believe that because of another belief that's based on another belief. I remember saying this once recently, I think. I did study in a seminary for a while, guys, and we were asked to define theology. And my definition nearly got me in a lot of trouble, actually, because I said, because we were being taught by theologians, people, academics who specialize in studying scripture and everything. And I said, theology is scholars guessing about scholars, guessing about scholars, guessing about God. And actually, I think that's a true statement. Most of them, somebody said something way back in the ancients without any literal physical proof, and then a whole load of later scholars, often not of the same sect or cult or religion, try then to explain it more, and then the next set of scholars try to explain what those secondary and third sources said. And by the time you go to a seminary or somewhere or something to learn about world religions, what you're getting is, it's the consequence and the result of scholars guessing about scholars, guessing about scholars, guessing about God. And a lot of them are far too arrogant to actually look for the truth. They're so rooted in this particular belief that, somewhat ironically and very desperately and sadly, their beliefs block them from seeing the truth when it's laid out right in front of them, as I hope I'm trying to do. I'll be able to do here. Okay, so on with the glasses at this point, guys, so I can continue to read this. So let's look at the numbers here. Okay, so there you see I've broken the three elements down again, right, as I did in the previous slide. You've got the white circle, which represents the deity aspect, okay? And you've got the red one on the left there representing the masculine, and the blue one on the right representing the feminine, which I said before blend together into this like yin yang thing rooted in the original. So the first one, I'm calling it infinity or source, okay? You can also call it eternal, yeah? Okay, so our infinity or source, and you see that sideways number 8 in the middle, that is the symbol for infinity, because it's not appropriate to put the number 1 in there or anything. Is it just, no. But equally, if you, and we're talking about light now, don't forget, okay, what we call white sunlight is actually that visible spectrum you see at the bottom. So that would be a rainbow. If you looked in the sky and saw a rainbow, and a rainbow happens when light passes at 42 degrees through water droplets, or if you have a prism and it's set at a 42-degree angle, whatever the facets on it is, and then you put a beam of light at it, then boom, a rainbow comes out the other side. That's how you split light into the visible colors. But if you're looking at the whole of the visible spectrum in a normal day, you know, natural sunlight, we call that white, don't we? White sunlight, you know, but clearly it's not white, it's sort of transparent. But the effect of it is that it bathes everything in light that we can then identify in separate colors, all right? Now, what are these numbers, you might ask? Well, if you look at the bottom there, guys, Do I need to make this up a bit bigger for you? Maybe I do. If you look at the bottom, you will see there. Now, this is the range of light that we can see. Can you see the gray bar running across the top of the colors there, guys? All right, that gray bar, in case you can't read it very well, radio waves is on the left, followed by infrared waves. Then you've got the visible spectrum in the middle. You can see that, can't you? Right? Then you've got ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. So we know that all of these things exist on the electromagnetic spectrum. So imagine a sort of a long line, although it's not exactly like that, of course, it's all waves and particles and stuff. But if you imagine a long line, and along that line, these different things are positioned, which we know have a physical and even psychological effects on the human body and the human mind. All right, we know that for a fact. And the question I raise in a book I wrote nearly 25 years ago is, well, if all of these other aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum can have physical effects on us, whether it be using, the ultraviolet to do dental work, or whether it be listening to radios, and the music affecting you emotionally, then why can't color be doing something similar? Except we haven't learned to read it yet. Okay, well, I forgot. I'm going to try and put another light on here, guys, to try and. I keep buying these lights for Danny, and he hasn't. Never mind. There we are. I hope that's a little bit better. So, let there be light, as they say. And those of you who watched the last couple of videos with Danny, that's part of the reason I'm up in this room tonight, because he was making semi-naked appearances, in his innocence. And funnily enough, while I was talking about the Garden of Eden. Hello, Maureen. Nice to see you. Ida, nice to see you as well. Mr. Gilchrist, I'll get back to you in a moment, and that we'll see if I can comment on that. What's it all about, Sean? Why are we here? Stick with us, buddy, and hopefully we will. And Sean there, hello. And hopefully we'll get back. Hello, Philomena. Nice to see you again. At least I'm getting through a few names. So let's stick with the numbers here. So if you look at this, the visible spectrum, now there will be a few people who see a narrower band, like people who might be colorblind, for example, and there might be a few people, isolated people, who see slightly wider. Check any of this out if you have any doubts, guys. If you have any doubts about the facts I'm presenting to you here today, just look in any science book and look at a few, because it's a consensus, and you'll find, I'll say, off the top of my head, I'll say 9 out of 10 science books or universities are going to agree that the range of the visible spectrum that we can see, a normal human being, is between deep reds at 700 nanometers. That's the size of the wavelength, okay? And deep blue violets, well, we'll just call them deep blue for simplicity here, at 400 nanometers, okay? You should note here, guys, that purple is not in the natural spectrum. Purple is a blend of red, white, and blue, and it represents traditionally royalty, mainly because you can create purple as a pigment from sort of very rare flowers in the old days anyway. That's why only very rich people or royalty got to wear them, because they were too expensive for your average guy. All right, so it became a symbol of royalty. That'll come into play at some point while we're explaining this, okay? So to just take a slightly closer look at this again. So I'm now linking up. What we have here is infinity, or source, at the top. Then you've got masculine on the left here, deep red, and feminine as deep blue. All right, now I hope I've explained that in a manner that is beyond direct contradiction. Before I go on any further, I'm just going to go over at Mr. Gilchrist's question. I'll pop this up on the screen so people can see it and we can read it together. I'm not sure if it's 100% that I can deal with, because I have to read it with you guys. I was talking about Carl Gustav Jung. Mr. Gilchrist says, and I think it's a Mr. Jung is a curious character, especially when one looks at who, where, and what of his work from 1933. Quite the engineer, but maybe not for making the best of engines. All right, well, I didn't know he was an engineer, so there we are. I've learned something this evening. But for those of you who wouldn't know, Carl Gustav Jung was an understudy of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud being one of the fathers of psychoanalysis, also arguably a little bit himself. Maybe you have to be the best psychiatrist or psychologist. But Jung, what I know about Jung in particular was that he was meticulous in trying to, this thing doesn't seem to want to work very well. He was meticulous in trying to explain, in particular, Christian symbolism and Christian, let's just call them mysteries, through the agency of science. And in some cases, he does a really good job of it. It's interesting reading, if nothing else. I found that he tended to be, this is the pot calling the kettle black here, a bit over verbose in his articulations. In other words, one of the quotes I use in the Color of Truth book is his quote, and it fills almost it's a substantial paragraph. And basically what he's saying is coincidences are not coincidences if they keep on happening. But the way he says it is all, your head's going, what? Punctuation. But that was what he was basically saying. So if things keep happening and you don't have an obvious explanation for it, then they're not coincidences. There's a reason, there's a cause for this to happen. And I'm showing you here, right here, this thing keeps happening in scripture, mythology, in world religions, in politics, believe it or not, in our daily lives, and we haven't understood it. We haven't seen it. Arguably, it couldn't have been seen anyway, not at least until around the 1960s or so, there, when people started to understand color psychology and things like that. But it's interesting, it still goes way back into antiquity, into our mythologies and our creation stories and all that sort of stuff, I'll just pull you back out there now, Mr. Gilchrist. Thank you for that comment. If I see another one there that's topical, I'll bring it up. But he said he was social psychological engineering. Okay, I'll have to look into that because I didn't know he was involved in engineering, so-called. But if it's social psychological engineering, yeah, who knows? He was certainly a gifted man. I get the impression he was a very decent man. I don't see him aligning himself consciously with wicked or evil intent. But again, I could be wrong. I didn't know him personally, but that was my impression of him. But anyway, yeah, Carl Gustav Jung. That's right. Yeah. So, right, guys. So I hope you're with me so far on this. So we've established now there's this original principle. It's got mathematical properties. What are those? Well, it's these numbers, 7, 70, and 700, in as much as it corresponds to the 700 nanometers. And again, it's the amount of times these numbers repeat in human history as if this blueprint has an effect on human history, despite the fact that we all believe we're doing what we bloody well want, whether I'm a king or an emperor or some sort of tyrant. And all of a sudden, my empire starts crumbling, exactly and it's usually 400 years, actually, guys. We may get around, not today, but on another occasion, I'll show you charts where this is proven. But it's like we're following, and it would make sense. We're all made of this light thing. Maybe there was some original way we were meant to be that would align with the properties of light and color. That is, it's all around us. We can see it everywhere, every day. Only we haven't known that it was there, first of all. And secondly, we haven't realized how to decipher it. And thirdly, how to interpret it. Decipher, interpret, the same sort of thing. Okay, so let's see now. I know I don't have many slides now tonight because I knew that we'd have to talk quite a bit, and I was hoping we'd get some questions, Gilchrist has mentioned something else again. Oh, really? I'll put this up because it is important. Of course, any reference to Nazis is invariably negative. But Mr. Gilchrist says, theosophy. Yes, I know about this now. Again, you're calling it that occult? Oh, religion. I think he means religion. Yeah, I was wondering what that word was. Yeah, I know you're writing fast. I understand. He was an advisor to the top Nazis. Then after the war, worked in the US in the social engineering program. Yes. Now, theosophy. Can we say much about this today? Just a brief comment, and then I'll move back to continuing the discussion about the original principle. Theosophy was one of the intelligent attempts to realign traditional religious beliefs with evolving science, I'm giving this a very short summary, guys, and I'm not saying this is the best summary in the world. Straight off the top of my head, I haven't read up on theosophy now for many years, but I did at one point. I remember being quite intrigued by it and listening to an awful lot of common sense, a lot of very intelligent people involved in it. But as Mr. Gilchrist said here, there's an occult sort of side to it, dabbling in not necessarily Ouija boards, but certainly the Jewish. I should know it off the top of my head, but anyway, there's a symbolism, the Kabbalah, and stuff like that. But yeah, there may have been an occult side to it, and of course, this push by people, especially the so-called elites, poor choice of words for them, I think, because in my opinion, many of them are amongst the worst human beings that have ever existed, and sadly, they tend to be controlling everything. But there's this urge constantly to want to dominate everyone else. And of course, one of the ways you can do that is through superior knowledge. So the fact that they were exploring this, I wouldn't hold that against them. But if there are definite sort of diabolical aspects, satanic aspects, that sort of stuff, eugenics and whatever, sometimes the theories, though, themselves are interesting. And you need these theories to work out what's the best way forwards. It's the practical application of something like eugenics, which requires the murder of millions of people, for example, that of course, no, there's something wrong with the formula if the action is that evil. And that corresponds to this as well, the original principle. So let's just pop to the next one, Mr. Gilchrist. And I won't be able to have a full conversation. Yeah, you just said that. He says here, the Tyrian purple, he calls it, is coming from, where's it gone now? Oh, there it is. The Tyrian purple is created from predatory snails. Yes, that's right. And indeed from combining red and blue. That's right. It's actually red, blue, and believe it or not, white. You'll understand why. Red and blue does it, but it's a combination of the three. And this is actually evident in scriptures, which actually serves to not fully authenticate. I wouldn't use that word now, but it creates another dimension. It's a bit like looking at this shrouded Turin thing that they've just done all these tests on, and they go, well, look, we've discovered there's some massive burst of radiation that only lasted, I think it was a 400th of a second or something. And they reckon that this is scientific proof now that something extraordinary happened. Then you have to rethink, well, hold on a minute. I've always been skeptical about that whole resurrection thing. Maybe I'll have to make a space now in my scientific investigations of the possibility of something like this actually happening in extra special circumstances, and of course the burst of radiation is what? Intense light. Let there be light. Okay, very interesting stuff. Now Maureen here mentions Alice Bailey. I'll pop you up there as well, Maureen, because I'd like to do more of this in the future, actually, a little bit more of exchanges backwards and forwards, let's see, let's show, I haven't read the whole comment there here, Maureen, sorry. Alice Bailey. Yeah, Alice Bailey wasn't she? She was a theosophist, as we were talking about a moment ago. She claimed her books were written in cooperation with a Tibetan teacher. The consciousness of the atom, the destiny of the nations, discipleship in the New Age, etc., etc. Possibly. Interestingly, though, I've just mentioned something about atom, which also links directly into this. The ancient Greeks had a notion of a human soul. They came up with this idea that there was such a thing as a human soul. And interestingly, they thought it comprised 50% fire, which would be the red, and 50% water, which would be the blue, the feminine and masculine properties, respectively. Isn't that interesting, right? But what's even more interesting is what they called it. They called it, the human soul, atom. And this will come into play again later as well, precisely into this formula that we're looking at. Okay, so to summarize here, guys, very briefly, we've got infinity or eternal, you could use, right? Then you move to the feminine aspect, it's the internal, and then the masculine aspect is the external. All right, there's three more. That's another triad that links this together. Let's see if I hope I've got another one at least to show you today. I have, good. So yes, this will round us off nicely today, guys. And again, thank you to everyone who's coming to listen, guys, because for me, over and above everything else, even all the work I did exposing corruption in the system, being vilified and attacked and disowned and jailed, and having them come after my family, and all of the things that those of you who know me quite well are aware that we went through. Ultimately, believe it or not, guys, it's all been about this. It's all been about this. And I believe many of those attacks that we suffered, and I suffered personally, and the family suffered, so thanks, Maureen, for the comment, were actually the dark energies, if you like, trying to silence somebody who has something important to share. Okay, not my truth, by the way, our truth. Okay, so let's have a closer look here then, guys, and see how we're doing there for time. So we've now, if you look over on the left there, I've broken down on the left and right, I've broken the original principle logo there down into 3 circles. CPA, that stands for concept, plan, and action. All right. Now, again, if you recall, and those of you that aren't regulars here, but if you recall, I've said this now, if every conscious act, and the emphasis here now is on conscious, every conscious act that a human person makes follows that formula. There's a concept, there's a plan, and there's an action. Even if you just want, look here, I'm thirsty, concept, thirsty, I need a drink. Plan, go and get some orange juice. Action, here it is. All right, concept, plan, action. If you build a house, try and do it without having a concept or an idea first of what you want. Try and make plans without having a concept. That's almost impossible. And then try building a house without having either a concept or a plan. And I know this because I've sort of done this myself, you know. And you run into all sorts of problems, guys, okay? This is the natural way of doing things. The only exceptions to this is if you're in a blind rage or steaming drunk or under the influence of alcohol, affluence of alcohol, you know, or something like that, okay? No, I haven't had a drink, guys, okay? Or drugs or whatever. So if you were, so in other words, the original function of humans was supposed to be concept, plan, and action, which corresponds to what? Deity, feminine, masculine. And if you know your chakras, guys, the deity or the crown chakra represents the spirit or the deity, the God, your access to the divine. The communications chakra, which is blue, right? The communications attached to what? Your mind. And then the red one, which is in the solar plexus or down in the groin area, represents the action chakra, also the sexual chakra, okay? Corresponds to the masculine, all right? Now, I know females have bits down there as well, but don't worry. So I, as a man, and if you'll notice tonight, the red, white, and blue tie, especially for you all, okay? I, as a man, red, masculine, okay? I have feminine aspects to my character and personality. And believe it or not, those are supposed to be directing the masculine elements. In other words, I'm not supposed to be getting in a rage, losing my temper with the dingbat driver who just overtake me on the wrong side of the road or something. What should kick in first, according to this original principle, is the feminine aspects, guided by the divine, would then instill in me to be, yes, we've got strength for a reason. It's there. We're stronger than the females physically. But they, arguably, the good ones, are arguably actually closer to the divine in the same way that your mind is the intermediary between the spirit and the body. All right, that's how we interpret and make plans. So it starts to make sense, I hope, guys. All right. So over on the right, then you've got origin, feminine, masculine, OFM. All right. And again, this is another triad, same. So it's God, Eve, Adam. Do you remember I said a few minutes ago? So you've got concept, plan, and action, spirit, mind, and body, origin, feminine, masculine. Okay. So all starting to come together. Eternal, internal, external, right? And we haven't even started talking yet about atoms and molecules and all the rest of it. We're just keeping it here in the thematic realm, also mentioning numbers and colors, okay? So we're into the last 10 minutes now, guys. So this, again, these are just diagrams to just bring it home and going, yeah, all of this makes logical sense so far. Yes, Stephen, we're with you. This all starts to make logical sense, all right? But how does this relate to us the way we're living today? And again, you see, part of the problem with understanding and knowing this stuff is that I want to sort of jump straight to the, look at this then. How do you explain that sort of thing? And then get someone going, That's incredible. I don't know. Please explain it to me, Stephen. But you can't do that when you're doing presentations like this. We have to walk incrementally, step by step, and hopefully, as I said, like some of you have done today, if something pops out and you want to fire your question up here, I'll put it up on the screen and I'll do my best to answer it. Okay. So here we have then this original principle. I'm saying that this is the way things were supposed to be before evil entered the world, or before it entered the proverbial Garden of Eden, if you want to call it that. But we'll use mythological stories to explain points, but they're not. You see, myths, the book by Joseph Campbell called The Power of Myth, it's extraordinarily important book. If you get a chance to read it, his name is Joseph Campbell. I think he's passed away since. And he brings mythology right to the forefront of human social activity and says, look, guys, we haven't realized it, but look at this ancient story from the Arapaho Indians, and look at the Mexicans, and look at the people up in the North Pole, the Inuits, then look over here at the Chinese. And he starts comparing all them. He said, look, they're all talking. It's all the same, basically the same story or stories, slightly in different context or with wearing different clothes or different names or whatever. But, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, I mean, that predates the Bible stories that match it. How do you explain this? But the reason is because subliminally, we're all connected, except we haven't, because it's subliminal, we're not conscious of it. Okay? People are starting to talk about this more and more now, and it's starting to come more to the forefront. But it's a difficult thing to grasp, But when you then come back to the physical properties of light, and you say, well, look, if we start here, that is something people don't need to argue about. The very fact that you're thinking and you're talking and you're breathing and you're walking, then you were made of light. Okay? I do a presentation which is called Children of Light. We are all literally children of light. That's how it starts. And they go, what do you mean literally? And then I go in and explain it all about the energies of the universe and plants and osmosis, and how by eating plants, we're actually eating sunlight indirectly, and apples or whatever, and therefore that is going into us. But it comes all back to this original notion that we started in this soup of light, if you like. However, whether it was done, whether you believe, and again, a belief, see, I try not to talk about beliefs, guys. What I'm saying is that's one thing we know. According to science, we all evolved out of light. Okay, so let's start there. Just whether we were created in some magical storm of creativity by a being that is beyond our comprehension, it's possible. Don't ask me what I believe, guys. I talk about what I know, all right? Because this is the best way to hold an audience, especially an audience that you're trying to impart or convey information to, for you to do what you wish with it. Yeah, because I may have been one of the first people, fortunately, to discover this. Partly, I believe, because I did so many different jobs and I studied so many different disciplines. I was a sort of a generalist rather than a specialist, and many of the specialists are so dedicated and expert in their particular field. But he might be an astrophysicist, but ask him to come and watch a game of soccer, and I don't know what this is all about. I've always argued that we need more generalists, sort of people with a good, solid understanding of most of the disciplines, because we need to see the connections between them, and fewer experts. And those experts should be willing to talk to us generalists, give us their expertise that we're missing, in order to raise the level of consciousness of humanity. And it all sounds very noble and wonderful, but that's ultimately what we're supposed to be doing. We started with this original principle. And if you think about it, guys, if this is spirit, mind, and body, okay, is the original principle. It's how we were meant to be. And at the moment, I'll say one thing, and sort of a cover-all caveat. None of us reflect that original principle. Arguably, the Christ figure did, right? Arguably. But he did so within an environment that we could call the kingdom of hell on earth. Okay, so he could only manifest this original principle within his own persona and within the immediate surroundings of people who are willing to give him that space, if you know what I mean. And that's ultimately, obviously, why he got crucified and stuff. because he came into the kingdom of hell. When I say came, however he manifested this original principle, it was pretty clear that he was someone pretty special, But again, I'm not asking anyone to believe anything, all right? We just look at the facts. And once you establish the facts, if you can establish a baseline, like, for example, if we can prove this substantial archetype exists, which I know it does now, I can say that. I don't have to believe in this anymore. I know it's true. It's real, but I don't have time in one session to explain it all to you. But as we go incrementally, week by week, I intend to do so in such a manner that some people are going to be going, oh, holy Lord, have you seen this? And there'll be a cascade of connections that go, boom, 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 and you go, oh, and it all starts to make sense, all of it, yeah? But, one step at a time, okay? So now we have these sequences, they're connected to these numbers. The numbers themselves repeat with uncanny consistency in history and in mythology, in scripture, in science, the structure of the atom, for example, and so on and so forth, which we will look at in a little bit more detail next week. Now, I think this might have been the last of those slides. Let's see what's next. Oh, no, I've got one more here yet. Oh, great, good. This will wrap us up, the last 2 or 3 minutes, guys. So I'm taking you back now into the Garden of Eden just for a minute, okay? And what we'll do is we'll start from here next week and move on in sequence to interlinking themes. So what are we looking at here, guys? Well, look, let's go back to the Garden of Eden. We've already established there's an origin or a source, which we'll call God from the scriptural point of view. There's the Eve would be the deep blue, the feminine, okay? And Adam would be the deep red, or the masculine. And interestingly, the word for red in Hebrew is Adam, I think. All right, isn't that interesting? Yeah. They also have Native American traditions. Their original man, they call him Lone Man. He's made out of red earth and stuff like this, guys. There's a lot of these connections. All right. So feminine, mind, and wisdom. And if you know your Bible stories, guys, you'll know that there were 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. Okay. There was the tree of knowledge of good and evil that everybody knows about. They've heard about it. Oh, that's the one with the apple on it. No, there's no mention of an apple in scripture, guys. None at all. Talks about fruit, not an apple. Okay. Talks about fruit. There's a bit of a naughty joke. I won't do it though. About what type of fruit really caused the problems in Eden. But it's. I might put it up in text if somebody really wants to know, but it's a little bit risque, so we'll keep this sensible and serious, okay? Last minute or two now, guys. So the point I want to make here is if you look in your scriptures, there are 2 trees that are mentioned as being special in the Garden of Eden. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So the tree of knowledge, what's knowledge? Knowledge is the mind, it's wisdom, it's a feminine, okay? Just bear with me on this. And the tree of life, how do you know your family tree? There it goes. Your family tree comes through the father's lineage, doesn't it? Yeah? All right. Whether it should or shouldn't is another story, but it does. That's our standard in human history, okay? So we'll start with this slide next week, and I will leave it there for the moment, guys. We'll talk a bit about the fruit and where wisdom resides, where action resides with the masculine and the feminine respectively. And I'll just throw us up ever so quickly into the very last slide. Here we go, which is this. No, not that one. No, don't. That's for another day. And that's where you can find us if you're looking for us, guys. There's a few of the places. If you're interested in more of this information, there's some of the places you can find us. I'll say thank you very much to those that commented this evening. I'll do. Oh, hello, Celia. Sorry, I didn't see yours. Yeah. And yes, and Deanna. I'll have a look at those comments, guys. I'll try and answer you directly on Facebook. If they're really good comments, we'll bring them up again next week. Good night and God bless everyone. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you again roughly at the same time. We'll try and do it around 7 o'clock next Sunday. Over and out.